What's going on, everybody? In this video I'm gonna talk to you about services in Angular framework. Technically your application doesn't require a service in order to run properly, but if you're gonna build a real application, real world application, big one, and I guess you are aiming at that, you're gonna need services because it's gonna make your application more tidy, and your components are gonna be on point. Like you don't need to write irrelevant code inside your components. Your components are just gonna be focused on the logic that you wanna achieve, and services are gonna do for you other stuff, and you're gonna see that throughout the application. So for instance, all this mess shouldn't be included in your components file. And don't get me wrong, I don't mean that you shouldn't write like 57 lines of code in your component file, because actually you're gonna need a lot of lines of code to fill your component with. But what I mean here is that the code that you're writing in your component file should be focused on the logic, which is mainly controlling your view file, the HTML file. In this case, I want to retrieve some data about customers in the components file. So I need to replace all this mess by one line of code that is like get data or something. And this is how I'm getting services into the game. Let's create a new service. Go to the terminal. I'm gonna type ng generate service. Gonna give it its name, customer service. And the module is named app, which refers to the app module file. Let's find the file ng have just created. This is how service looks like in Angular. Nothing much special. Anyway, let's go to the app module. You can see here in the app module the providers property, the service have been added to the property. And that's because we have mentioned that the module is named app when we are creating our service. If you didn't do that, you have to add it here by yourself. I go to the component, the customer components file, because I want to tell you my aim here. My aim here is to use the instance, assuming I'm having an instance now of the service that I've just created. I want to call a method that's part of this service. This method is gonna get to me the values of the customers. All this gibberish here, it's gonna return to me in this line of code. So when the HTML file requires a value for the customers, it finds it, and it doesn't find it is null or undefined. I am gonna take this line of code into action, so I'm gonna move it in the ng onInit method. We could have put it inside the constructor, but we put lines of code in the constructor when they have no other option to be implemented except inside the constructor. That's because we don't want to fill the constructor with unnecessary code. We want to keep it as short as possible. I'm taking this array, the customers, and I will be moving it into the service. So what's the deal about this decorator? This decorator is referring to the class that is implemented after it in the next line, and it just tells us that the customer service is a class that it's gonna be injected as a dependency into other components inside the constructor of other components. Effectively, there is one instance that's going to be created in the whole web application, and can be passed through all the components, and this is how it's going to be done. This way, I can access it in the component after injecting it in the constructor. But of course, I gotta import it so that my IDE doesn't complain. Now let's implement the method, the guest customers method. And it simply just returns the customers array so that the customers component can use it happily. Let's go now to the browser and hope no problem is going on. Yeah, I guess there are no complaints whatsoever. At this point, allow me to show you how things are actually implemented in the real world. And also in the process, I want to prove to you my point that this method, getCustomers, is abstracting a lot of details behind it, which means that however I'm implementing this method in the service component, in the service code, whatever I'm pulling from HTTP server or MySQL, nothing much should be changing in the components code. First thing, I'm gonna imitate an HTTP request here, not gonna be an actual HTTP request, and then I'm gonna come back to the component, and it expects that this value, the customers, is gonna change accordingly to what the HTTP request is returning to it. Okay, now let's change the return type of the getCustomers into an observable, and this observable expects an object array, which actually refers to the customers array. This thing, the observable, it imitates the behavior of a concept in functional programming languages called monads. It's a derived thing taken from Haskell, which is a pure functional programming language, and I'm not going to talk about it here because it's irrelevant to our topic. And also, you have to know, if you set yourself into a journey trying to discover what monads are, you most probably might end up not making it, not coming back from this journey. But still, we can deal with it this way. So now I'm gonna import the observable. I'm gonna import it from RxJS. And also I'm going to import something else called off, which actually converts data into observables. As you know, this method returns an observable, so I'm going to change the type of the customers array. I'm going to convert it into an observable. So let's go back to the customers component code. This method now, the getCustomers, is returning an observable to us, so I can just assign it to customers, and the HTML view is not gonna know how to deal with it. So what I'm doing here, and this is why actually we're using an observable, if this method is fired doing its thing and it's taking few seconds, the next line of code, which is I'm writing now, is not gonna get executed until the method before it is done first. And this effect, we don't want to have this kind of effect in our web application. What is gonna happen here is this line of code is gonna take its time, whatever it is, and it's not gonna block the next lines from executing. This is like threads, but don't confuse it with threads because it's very different. It takes another approach. The approach it takes is like, I'm gonna be subscribing a sequence of logic of code. This sequence is gonna execute once the HTTP request is finished. What goes here is a logic sequence, and whenever you see this equal sign followed by the greater than, you know it's a function, and this is from JavaScript. I'm not gonna talk about it very much here. From this side, here goes the argument, and the other side goes the logic sequence. In the argument, I'm gonna be receiving the customers from the HTTP request, which I'm expecting from the service that I've just fired. And the logic sequence is gonna be predominantly just assigning the value of the customers from the value of this customer from HTTP that I've received from the service. And this is what I want to do in order to be viewed by the HTML. I'm gonna repeat it again. This customers array, which is returned from the HTTP request imitation, is gonna be passed into the function that is in the components file, the customers from HTTP, and is gonna be assigned to the customers here. And just in case it complains about the braces, I'm gonna put braces here because this is a sequence of lines of codes. If there is other lines of code, gonna write it here followed by a semicolon, and probably you're gonna need that. Let's take a look at the web browser. I guess it works out fine. It loads the data. Now let's see that the observable are doing their thing really. I'll be imitating here the effect of the HTTP request, which is just the delay effect. in order to show you that the subscribe method is working as it's supposed to do. So I'm gonna take a function from the JavaScript, the set timeout function. This function is gonna take the first argument as a callback, which is just like a logic sequence, which is the same thing, and it's gonna execute after a certain amount period, which I'm gonna set to 3000 milliseconds, which is just 3 seconds, and it's gonna execute this. Let's go check now what's going on. Open the website, and of course I'm gonna open the JavaScript console in order to see the log. So I'm expecting user code to go on, yeah, and the data is gonna load later after 3 seconds, and well, it works properly now, working as expected, which is a good thing, I guess. Well, I guess we can wrap it from here. If you find this video useful and you liked it, please show me you liked it. It will really help me a lot. And drop me your comments below. What do you want for the next video? Either I can be doing an HTTP server implementation connecting to the AngularJS frontend, or I can make like custom HTML elements and incorporating them into the AngularJS program. And I will definitely see you guys. Peace.